Jalen Washington is finally having a healthy offseason. What's that going to mean for what he can add to North Carolina this upcoming season?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, July 26, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined today by our guy, Pat Kilby. What a surprise. No, I'm just kidding. Great, as always, to have our guy, Pat, with us. We want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or watch every single day. For you everydayers, you know that in the summer, we've been going through our summer roster preview for the men's basketball team. If you're just joining us, make sure you go back and check out the first 3 episodes of this, where we hit the 2 freshmen, Elliot Cadeau and Zayden High. And then last week looked at the other sophomore, Seth Trimble. And today we move into Jalen Washington. Pack, we would have had 2 other sophomores to talk about, but Tyler Nickel is Gandhi, and so is Will Shaver, back to their home states, actually, both of them. So can't wait to play Virginia Tech and have a friendly competitive rivalry with Tyler Nickel and hopefully send him home with a big fat L. Yeah. So, Pack, let's get right into this, talking about Jalen Washington. As always, would you hit us with some bio info about Jalen, as well as just giving us a look at some of his stats from last season?
Yeah, you bet. So Jalen Cantrell Washington.
What a name, man.
I love that middle name.
Cantrell is awesome.
It is.
Oh, Pack, wait till next week when we talk about Harrison Ingram. This dude might have my favorite middle name on the team. Anyway.
I like it. Yeah, it's going to be tough to beat Cantrell.
Right? Man.
So Jae'lyn obviously going to be a sophomore. Power forward. Could play some 5 for us as well. From Gary, Indiana. Height of 6'10", which is kind of shocking. He seems like he's so much taller than that on TV.
Is it? I think it's because he's so lanky.
That could very well be it.
Makes him seem like a beanpole, you know?
Yeah, he does. Weighs 225, and this, here you go on the lankiness. Wingspan is 7'4" per his bio on GoHeels.com. Jersey number 13. You can follow Jalen on Twitter at Jalen_W13 or Instagram, which is W_Jalen.
You don't see the period very often in Twitter handles or Instagram handles.
No, you don't. No, that throw you for a loop right there. So let's run through some of his stats real quick.
Yeah.
Jalen played in 20 of the 33 games. I'm thinking a lot of that is due to his injury, right? So his rehab, Carolina was very cautious with the way that they approached him and his minutes, his playing time. And so he played in only 20 of the 33 games. Averaged 5.7 minutes per game, 2.2 points per game, with a season high of 13 at Virginia.
I think his season high is going to be mostly that game.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because that was his season high in minutes as well, with 27 minutes. So makes sense. The most minutes is the most production. Rebounds, 1.4 per game. 2 total assists, 7 total turnovers, 1 block, 1 steal. 16 for 35 from the field, 45.7% from the field, 0 for 7 from 3. Definitely need to see him improve there, because if he's going to stretch the floor like Hubert says that he can, we need to see that. 11 of 17 from the free throw line, which is good for 64.7%. And then, like we talked about earlier, he missed the first 9 games due to injury, and so he made his debut on December 10th against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and so I mean, when you look at the math of that, missed the first 9 games, meaning there were 33 minus 9, 24. Yep. So he played in 20 of the final 24 games. So not bad for somebody that's kind of working their way back in from the kind of injuries he had. And as you said there, Pack, Jalen had that biggest game was the game at Virginia. And then his next most minutes that he played was the very next game at Louisville. That was January 10 and 14. And, man, when you look back at those games, I remember that Virginia game. It was just like a helpless feeling in the front court because Pete already wasn't playing. that was the game where Mondo had that real gross looking ankle injury like 2 minutes into the game. And I remember Coach Davis trying to use Justin McCoy, and that just, poor guy. Like I hate to say it, but it wasn't working that night, right? Like, is that a fair statement to me?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
And so Jae'lyn came in, man, and was really, really productive, like super efficient, had a great game. And then it was just one of those where you could tell second half he was starting to lose some of that momentum. And that's what happens when you're not fully back in game shape. Yep, totally understand that, especially against a Virginia defense that does what they do. And then that Louisville game there, like 4 days later, still no Pete. Mondo played 24 minutes. I remember being completely surprised that Mondo was back. But in that game, Coach didn't use Justin McCoy at all. And so Jae'lyn picked up essentially all of those minutes in that one. So, Pack, I think it would be helpful for us to give everyone a reminder of Jae'lyn's injuries so they can kind of understand what all he's been through to get to the point that he's at right now. As I said, having his first healthy offseason since like Jesus left Earth, basically. So for Jae'lyn, he had a torn right ACL in January 2020, and then a partial right ACL tear in summer of 2021. And so here's what that means, Pack. He was injured in the 2020 offseason. He was injured during the 2021 offseason. He was rehabbing last season to get back into shape. So this is the first healthy offseason he's had since the summer going into his sophomore year of high school. So, Pack, with that in mind, you as a basketball coach, you understand injuries and getting players back and everything they got to do to get back into playing shape. So now that Jae'lyn's having an actual typical offseason for the first time, again, since heading into his sophomore year of high school, what are the reasonable expectations we can have of Jae'lyn this season?
Well, the offseason is such a crucial period because it's the one time that you can really spend getting better at yourself, your weaknesses without taking away from what the team needs. And so when you really look at it, like the way I always break it down, when it's in season, you're about doing what you do well for the benefit of the team. When it's the off season, you've got to correct all your weaknesses while you have the time to just work on yourself. And so with this being the first off season that he's actually had in 3 years, he can actually correct some of those weaknesses. And, the main thing for me is not really basketball related. Oddly enough, it's get in the weight room, put on muscle, and get quicker, get faster, get stronger, get more explosive. Because the question marks for me aren't on the offensive end, they're on the defensive end for him. And so if he can spend time doing those things, that'll help. And then just, the fact that he's getting to play pickup ball against the current team and all the guys that have come back, that's going to help him immensely too.
And that pickup ball stuff, we're going to talk some more about that next week, next Friday. Pack and I are doing an extra episode. Pack Kilby on for 2 episodes next week, and that's going to be awesome. So, Pack, I asked you to give me reasonable expectations for Jae'lyn this upcoming season. Give me some, let's talk unreasonable ceiling. Like, because let's remember, before all these injuries, Jae'lyn was like top 15, like ranked like 11th, I think, at 247 Sports. And then, kind of fell into the 40s after that. But I mean, like, if he can get back to being that guy, if he can get to his ceiling, well, I mean, are we crazy to think he could be a massive help for the Tar Heels this season?
No, I don't think we're crazy. It would shock me, but I mean, if he really got to his ceiling as a sophomore, what does that look like? That looks like him being the starting forward. That looks like him playing 25 to 30 minutes per game. That looks like him shooting 40% from three. That looks, that makes a huge difference if he's comfortable and he's hit his ceiling. So, that's probably unreasonable, but if we get it, that makes a massive difference for who we are as a team and what we're going to look like.
Yeah. And I mean, to get some semblance of healthy Jae'lyn's production, his junior year of high school, and listen, even in this year, again, he was playing on a partially torn ACL, so take this with a grain of salt. But his junior year of high school, Jae'lyn averaged 12.5 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 blocks. So, I mean, my man was filling up the stat sheet, not wild production from a points or rebound standpoint, but you almost love to see that across the board diversity. You know what I mean? And so in that year, again, with the partially torn ACL, led Gary, Indiana to the Indiana State semis, and I believe was like first team All-State, all this kind of stuff. So this dude's like an enigma, not in who he is, but just in that I don't think we really know what to expect, Pax. I don't even think maybe Jae'lyn fully knows what to expect out of himself. And so I think there's this weird thing where you could really hope of what that could mean, but it could also be like, well, he's just not all that much, or somewhere in between. And I think that's both tantalizing and maybe scary a little bit.
Yeah, it is. I think obviously we talked about the unreasonable expectation, but I do think we're going to get something in between. And that is a little bit scary, but it's also with the guys we've brought in, I kind of personally envision Ingram playing the 4. I could see Withers playing some 4. I can see Washignton playing some 4, doing some backup 5, maybe. Now that we have Okonkwo, that's kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
But if we get
make for some nice competition.
Yeah, it will. And iron sharpens iron.
That's right.
And that will definitely help. But, if we get even, a middle of the road Jae'lyn where he's just mid-level production, that's still good enough because of the depth that we've got. And it also means that we're playing our bench. If he's potentially the third option at the 4 and we're still getting some production off of him, that means we've developed some bench play. So I'm choosing to look at it like that, so maybe there's some positivity in there.
I like positivity. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So let's get into that. Now, Pac, earlier you talked about Jae'lyn shooting and how it needs to grow. I'd like to have a conversation about what we should really expect there. And then also take a look at what a successful season looks like for Jalen Washington. We're going to have that conversation in just a second. But first, this episode of Locked on Tar Heels is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's so easy to create a free job post, and then you just add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your profile to spread the word to everyone that you're hiring. And then you can use tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skill set and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. And let's be honest, the right team member can have a positive and measurable impact on your business. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Once again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Pac, we are talking about Jalen Washington today in our summer roster preview series. And I want to go back to the shooting you were talking about earlier. When Jae'lyn signed with North Carolina, in the press release from that, Coach Davis said this, quote, "Jae'lyn is the best shooting big in the country in this class." Now, Pac, obviously, we have had what I feel like is a really nice taste of what he can do in the mid-range. We've seen his touch, seen how good that shot is. If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, that was his first 2 points, was a nice like baseline jumper. But Pac, as you said, we did not get a taste of that with his outside shot. 0 of 7 from 3 last year. And what I'm trying to figure out is what's actually true. The things that the statements Coach Davis has made, the numbers that we had from last year, or is it somewhere in between those two things? What do you think on that?
It's probably somewhere in between. I don't read too much into the 0 for 7. Now, it does have to be better, but I do think he's a really good shooter. I do. I don't know if I would say he's the best in his class or even, top 5. I don't. It's yet to be proven.
Hey, I think Brandon Miller might have been the best shooting big in the class. Just
maybe. Maybe. But I do think he's good, and he's got to show it now. And there's some adaptation that comes with playing at that level, especially when you're coming off of those injuries that you're coming off of. This year is going to be more of the telltale sign for me.
I agree.
Can he shoot it consistently and stretch the floor for us? Because that will be exactly what we need to see. And he's had a year of adaptation and getting used to that. He's had a healthy offseason. So I think we're going to start to see more of the true Jae'lyn as far as his ability to stretch the floor from the three-point line.
I sure hope so. And as you said, such a small sample size. I don't think you can put too much stock into that because, think about it. If he hits the next 3 3-pointers he had taken last year, just like that, he goes from 0% to 30%. And that's better than a couple high volume 3-point shooters for Carolina shot last year. We'll just leave it at that. So, take a small sample size with a grain of salt there. But even with his free throw percentage, it's 64.7%, but he shot 11 of 17. That feels better than 64.7%. So I think definitely it's a case of better days are ahead. And, yes, Coach Davis, I think sometimes is given to speaking a little with a little exaggeration. I'll say that. But I agree with you, Pac, that I think he is a good shooter. Now, let's talk some strengths and weaknesses. When you're trying to get in a front court that's already got Armando Bacot, has multiple other power forwards like you talked about with Jalen Withers, and who knows what Harrison Ingram will do, and now James Okonkwo, Zayden High, all of that. What is it that's special about Jae'lyn that sets him apart that'll get him on the court in minutes either at the 4 or the 5?
Well, if he lives up to his ability and the height to shoot the ball, that's what we just talked about. That's a good start. That can set him apart, and he has that capability. But I mentioned earlier, I'm not as concerned with his offensive skill set.
Yeah.
I think that's there. I'm concerned with the defensive end. We saw it last year when he was involved in pick and rolls and guarding on the perimeter, which is a huge part of the game now. Then, boy, he really struggled, and teams went at him. And so if he can prove to be a solid rim protector and he can guard on the perimeter, just enough to keep them in front and force contested shots or give the basketball up, then that will help set him apart as well. But then, he has the size and the length that differ so much from Harrison Ingram and Jalen Withers, the other two that are projected to play at the 4, or even, Zayden High. He's got great length. He can alter shots. He can rebound well. So he's got, some things that you just can't coach. And so those things set him apart as well.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Pac. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's that thing, all you athletes out there listening know this to be true. And Pac, you and I certainly do as well, that when you're coming back from injury, even if it's you're waiting a little bit or it's been some time, it just takes so long to trust your body again. And I think that has to be some part of the struggles last year out on the perimeter. Or I'm not saying he's going to set the world on fire out there, but there has to be a world in which he defends on the perimeter better as he learns to trust his body again more. I'm also really curious to see what his weight is when we get the roster out this year. Well, what do we have? 225? Is that what he was last year?
Yeah.
Is what we said? I'd really like to see if through some of that muscle gain that Jonas Saracen helps him put on, if he's into the 230s, maybe even touches 240, man, I think that could really be something right there. So, Pac, I think we already probably touched there in what you said on probably the biggest glaring weaknesses that coaches try to exploit with him. So let's move straight into our other question, what we always like to wrap up this section with. Imagine your coach Hubert Davis sitting down with Jae'lyn at the end of the season. It's been a successful year for him if let's fill in the blank.
If he's shooting 35% from three on an attempt or two per game, if he's averaging, it's tough to know how many minutes he's going to play.
Yeah.
But, if he's altering shots, blocking, a shot a game, if he's somewhere between, 3 and 5 rebounds per game, I think, which is reasonable. Just guesstimating how many minutes he's going to play, I would say, 10 to 15, 12 to 15.
We're going to find out in a minute because I'm going to hold you to the fire when we do over-unders.
Okay. So if he can get us, 3 to 5 rebounds a game, a blocked shot, maybe a couple more altered, and then shoot 35% from three on an attempt or two per game, that's successful. That's successful. That's what we need coming off the bench. Some scoring, some rebounding, and some defense.
Yeah.
And hopefully he can bring that for us.
Yep. I think those are fair points to say. And I'll put it in a way that, like Coach Williams often said, I just want to say it's going to be a successful year if he can come into a game and not hurt the team. And not that he did last year, but I think I'd like to go so far as to say it's a successful year if Jae'lyn can come into a game and actually help the team because he brings something of a unique skill set that maybe the other bigs in the front court aren't doing. So that's what I'm going to say is a successful season. Put more of it, like allow your stats to sit where you just put them, and then I'll just create a little bit of a narrative around that maybe, and we can let it sit there. So, Pack, we got to talk about, as always, I want to get a comp from you about Jalen Washington, who you would compare him to. And I just said it a minute ago, but I got some over-unders that I want us to both answer to close out today's show. We'll do all that in just a second. All right, Pack, Jalen Washington, big lanky dude, 7'4" wingspan, as you talked about. And we often like to talk about, sometimes we'll do both the UNC comp and an NBA comp. Whichever of those you got for me, I'd love to hear who you'd like to compare our guy Jae'lyn to.
Well, I say we just combine the UNC and the NBA.
I love it. I love it.
Because here's what I'm thinking.
Give me a professional Tar Heel. That's what that sounds like.
That's exactly right. That professional Tar Heel is Ed Davis. And I think there's some comparisons here to an extent. I think Jae'lyn is probably a little bit more gifted offensively in today's basketball skill set. And then I think Ed Davis was probably a little bit better defensively. But I still think there's some similarities there in the way that they play, in their body types, in the way that they do things defensively. Now, there's still some room for Jae'lyn to grow to catch up to Ed defensively, but I really like that comparison, and I think they're pretty similar in a lot of ways.
That's really interesting. Easy Ed, and even in temperament, maybe, like Jae'lyn is pretty laid back. He's a fun-loving guy, and so maybe there's some of that as well. Love it. I always like to see how people feel after your comps, if they're like, yeah, I feel that, or if they're all enraged. So we'll wait and find out when the episode drops. Now, Pack, let's get to the over-unders to wrap up the show. I've got 4 of them for us today. Several of the things you just talked about. And what's funny is as I look at the numbers I set, they're falling right in between those gaps you were giving me a minute ago. So good luck finding your way above or below those. Let's start with minutes per game, as you were talking about. I've set that at 12.
Man, I think you pretty well hit it on the head.
Thank you.
I like Jalen Washington, okay, but I really like Harrison Ingram and I really like Jalen Withers. And I think those two are going to eat up a lot of the minutes at the 4. So I'm going to take the under here.
Okay.
But I could see it being the over. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to take the under too. I'm going to say 10. And then it really just depends on his level of effectiveness and his ability to play alongside Armando or not. Because if he's only getting minutes at the 5, I think that's few, that stays to our under. If he's getting time at the 4 and the 5, that gives him a pretty easy path to getting up to 15. I said it last week on the show when we were talking about Seth. I really do want to do an exercise at some point this offseason ahead of when we get to October, November, to look at minutes allocation, right? Because when we're doing it, just throwing it into the void like this, you can throw any numbers out there. But when we really start to look at the allocation of those 200 minutes, I think that's going to give us a better idea of what we can allot to Jae'lyn. And so that'll be a fun exercise for some time. All right, Pat, where you want to go next? I'm going to give you the option of points per game, 3-point field goal percentage, or rebounds per game.
Ooh, the trickiest one is rebounds per game, so let's go there.
Yeah, 4. 4 is what I set it at. And I believe earlier you said, I think he'll have somewhere between 3 to 5 rebounds a game.
That's exactly what I said. So, God, just given that I took the under on the minutes, I'm going to take the under on the rebounds. But, 7'4" wingspan, there's potential for the over there. But I'm going to stick with the under.
Yeah, I'll go over on this one. He was at 1.4 or 1.2 last year. I do think he'll have, more minutes per game, and I think he'll start to carve out some space, especially if his minutes, as we were just speculating, if his minutes are chiefly backing up Armando and he is the main 5 on the court, then I think he hits that over pretty easily. But yeah, I would, if I were putting a number on it, I'd say 6 is where I'm at. All right, Pack, you picked the last one. Let's go with points per game, and then we'll wrap up with 3-point percentage. I've set points per game at 5. As a reminder, last year in his 5.7 minutes per game, he scored 2.2 points per game. What are you taking here? 5 points per game, over or under?
I'm going to take the over here. I think he's going to hit somewhere between 5.5 and 6 points per game. So I'm going to go with the over. Getting to the free throw line, hitting some shots like we think he's going to do. And then, if we get in transition more, like I expect us to, he gets a transition bucket a game, and we're there. So that's kind of where I see that coming.
Yeah. Yep. I'm in that same range. I was thinking 7 to 8 points per game. Just I think he'll have the opportunity to do more, so I'll take the over as well. Let's wrap it up with 3-point field goal percentage. I've set this one at 30.
I'm taking the over. I really have faith. He's a good shooter, and I think he's going to land somewhere between 33 and 35% this sophomore season. If
I put it at 35, would you take the under?
Yeah, probably.
Yep.
I'm going to get, if you had to just nail me down on a number, I'd say like 33.5%.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to go with like the over for this number and set it at 32 is what I was thinking for him, just based on the good touch he has and the form and what Coach Davis has said about him and what he's seen in practice. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes to fruition next season. Folks, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Man, excited to see what Jalen Washington will do this year. Man, just really hoping for his sake that he'll be able to stay healthy and really trust his body. It's just like the health gods owe this dude a healthy year of basketball. And so excited for the Tar Heel fan base to get behind him. If you want to follow the show on Twitter, you can do that at Locked On Heels. You can follow, X, right? Elon, man, he keeps changing it up. You can follow Pack at Coach_K23 and me at Isaac Shade. Email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe on wherever you listen on audio, or if you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button to let us know you're here, and leave comments on your thoughts on Jae'lyn and what you think he will do this year. Tell us what we got right and what we got horribly wrong. We're going to talk again tomorrow, but until then, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Pack, let's get those deuces up. Peace.